his siblings' house. They have kids. There's a bunch of people staying there. I find out when we get there we're sharing a room, him and I, Ben and I. Keeping my virginity for my husband was extremely important to me. This is like part of the culture. So this is my first sexual experience.
This episode discusses sexual assault, clergy abuse, grooming, and institutional deception.
Ben had been around these people since he was 3 years old, from the beginning of Waverville and Bethel. So I just felt like I was like outnumbered.
So if you're invested in protecting reputations instead of truth, this episode will make you uncomfortable.
The next morning, I'm like traumatized.
For 16 years, you've been lied to. Not misled, not confused, lied to.
I would hear things like, trust me, hug me, touch me, it's okay, I'm a father.
Clergy abuse was reframed as a mess.
Most people won't face the maturity required of a mess like this.
Yeah.
Sexual assault was rewritten into a redemption storyline.
He's pulling me, and I remember saying no out loud at least once or twice.
And a crime was publicly rebranded as an affair.
And I had an affair.
And it worked. The man responsible was platformed, restored, and praised for his honesty.
Ben Armstrong is my hero.
His story was preached from stages, sold in books like Unpunishable, and repeated on podcasts as a cautionary tale about sin.
To it over and over as the culture of honor, and you are the living examples of that process.
Meanwhile, the woman he assaulted was erased. But what actually happened here is far darker than a mutual affair. What happened involved a pastor, much older than her, positioned as a spiritual father, housing dependence, grooming, alcohol, coercion, spiritual and prophetic manipulation, and unwanted sexual acts.
And then he comes back in from the bathroom and starts touching me inappropriately, and I remember completely freezing.
Her trauma became his testimony, and the church was taught to clap. Until now. Today, for the first time, you'll hear directly from the woman whose assault has been discussed publicly for over a decade without her consent and without her voice. This isn't cancel culture. This isn't bitterness. This is the truth. And everyone who attends Bethel, everyone who read Unpunishable, and anyone who cares about truth more than platforms deserves to hear it. Meet Sarah.
This is the first time I have spoken about any of this in 16 years. It's taken me this long to get to this point. I lost everything.
Let's just dive right in. Just start with how you got to Bethel, how you were introduced to Bethel.
I wasn't raised in a Christian family or a religious household at all. My parents, I would say, my mom's a pretty spiritual person, but never any kind of religion. I came from quite a bit of like abuse and trauma, and was like really, really struggling through high school. I had horrible depression and was just really trying to like figure out how to be a teenager. I had a really good group of friends. I was an athlete, and some of these friends on my team and like local kids. I grew up in a really tiny town in the middle of nowhere, and my school was very small. This was my whole childhood, just very small community, sheltered community. And these kids I thought were really awesome because they didn't like party, they weren't bad kids, and I was trying to stay good in school. And they invited me to go to youth group with them because I had been hearing awesome things about this youth group, and I didn't know anything about church, but they were like, it's not really like church, you don't have to worry about that. It's just really fun, we hang out. And so I started going, and ultimately, long story short, got saved, fell in love with Jesus, was super involved in this youth group, had amazing youth pastors that changed my life, like just the most amazing people I've ever had in like a church dynamic. This group of youth leaders, teens, we also had like our own bands, and we led worship, and so this church was Assemblies of God. I had heard kind of about Bethel, or like affiliated Bethel folks. The church that I went to was saying, it's kind of, I've heard weird things about it. We're not sure. Somehow some people I'm connected to hear about Chris Valentin speaking in Weaverville, and he's a Bethel guy. So I went with them. It was actually a family I think I was living with at the time. I was probably like 19. And so I went to see Chris Valentin in Weaverville speaking with a Bethel team, and they prophesied over me. And I was like, I'm just this kid that felt like I wasn't seen by God, just not important. I had horrible self-esteem, self-worth, just didn't think that I mattered. Being called out in that way made me feel so seen, and it was like really cool to have these people that I just thought were like so awesome come and pray for me. So then long story short, I go to worship school, which is amazing. It's like Christian summer camp, worship summer camp. I made some amazing friends there right off the bat, and had a great summer. Loved it, fell in love with Bethel, loved worship, and then applied for school ministry and got into school ministry and moved my life to Reading.
One of the leaders had come up to you and like noticed you and was like, "Hey, tell us about that into meeting Ben."
Okay, so I had been around for the summer in school of worship, and I kind of like was sort of getting to know people where they had seen me. I remember it was probably after a church service, maybe like a Sunday night or something, or Friday night whenever I was there, and it wasn't uncommon for like, I feel like young people my age that like were gifted and talented and like was like so coveted there, like they like sought people like that out. I remember just kind of bopping around doing my thing, and Eric Johnson approached me, who I knew he was Bill and Benny's son. I thought he was super cool. I think I had probably heard him speak. He approached me and sought me out and just was like, "Hey, like I'm Eric Johnson, like basically, I've been watching you, I've seen you around, I think you're really awesome. There's something really special about you." I remember him saying that and me being like, "Wow, like you guys see me?" And he ultimately, like, I love Eric to this day. I think he's a really good person. I love him and his wife. They've been really good to me over the years. But he basically said, like, first year can be really hard. Here's my number. If you need anything, reach out to me. You can find me anytime. And I thought that was really awesome because I'm like, wow, like this, like Bill and Benny's son thinks I'm cool, So that's kind of how that began. And then down the road, I go through first and second year. I was truly like, I came to Bethel purely to really just heal. Like I said, I was really depressed kid and had a ton of internal stuff going on. I was trying to heal, and I knew that God could heal me. And I came to Bethel because I like genuinely loved Jesus, and I really wanted to get to know God. And these people like radically loved God, and I believe even still, I think people that go there just really do love Jesus. And so for me, it was like, that's all I wanted, was to know God and to heal. So first year is really hard for me. I'm going through all this inner healing. Second year, I kind of come out of my shell. Like I had gone through a lot, but I was doing a bit better. I was living in a house with like 8 girls. And then I remember after I got into like my second car accident, I split my head open. I think Eric actually came to the ER when I got my stitches. And after that, he's like, we need to get you some covering, because he's really busy. And obviously I trusted him as a friend and kind of like a mentor. But he was like, you're getting attacked so much. You've got all this spiritual warfare. We need to get you some covering. I want to connect you with some good people. And Ben Armstrong was one of them. And I think he even mentioned to me, like, if you're thinking about an internship, he might be a good option for you because you guys are so similar. So
interesting. So Eric, who was very kind to you, obviously showed up to the hospital room when you were going through a hard time, all in good, genuine intention, said you needed some covering to protect you from the spiritual attack. And he recommended Ben Armstrong to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so then I didn't know anything of Ben Armstrong. At this point, I was ending my second year. He had been a first year pastor, and they're very like separate. I mean, you kind of intermingle in church and stuff, but for the most part, it's separate, and I didn't know of him much. I do have a very vivid memory, which I told you guys I just kind of recently remembered, of seeing him for the first time, and in like when I'd bop into like first year and I saw him with his two interns. I knew them kind of. I knew one of them better than the other, but I remember seeing him being very like affectionate, very touchy, very huggy with these girls, and thinking to myself like, wow, I thought one of them was his wife. I'm like, wait, I thought his wife was somebody else. And then I remember thinking this dark-haired girl was his wife because they were so close. And then ultimately discovered that that wasn't his wife. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. Like, they're really close. Leadership. I remember having this thought, like, leadership must really trust them and trust him to be that close with these girls, his interns. And a lot of that stuff was never questioned. It was so normalized. Everything kind of flew there. Nothing was really questioned. So I remember thinking like, wow, that's really cool for them to be that close with their mentor in the whole internship thing.
That part is so interesting to me because it's just interesting that you recognize it, that you saw it, and you saw it, you were, a student there. So the leadership had to have seen it. They had to have noticed how touchy-feely he was. But even for you, you said that as you saw it, you're like, wow, he must be very trusted. He must be a safe person, which is so different than maybe like, hey, that seems like that's a bad idea, or that seems like a red flag. He's around all these girls, like very affectionate. He's married. This is kind of weird. Instead, that culture, you're kind of conditioned to think, it seems like you're kind of conditioned to think like, oh, wow, he's so trustworthy. I just think it's interesting.
And we trusted leadership so well. Like, these were heroes. Upper leadership, a lot of them are still there. Everything that we saw, we just trusted because we believed so much in these people and their leadership.
Yeah, it's really kind of unfortunate that that's the way that the environment was created, because it would seem like, I think in hindsight, everybody's probably like, well, obviously, if you see a leader that's super touchy-feely, that's a red flag. But the red flag was turned into this like positive, like, well, look how red the flag is, like, and he's so prophetic and he's trusted by everybody, so it's actually a good thing. So I'm sure in hindsight it feels for anybody like, oh my gosh, I can't, but even leaders got to look at this. And I think even you doing this interview helps people that are listening probably go, okay, is this happening to me? And even church leaders or organizational leaders, ministry leaders going, okay, do we have people like this, and have we overlooked it because they're so prophetic and just so nice? But when someone's confusing an intern for the wife of the leader, that's not a green flag. That's a red flag.
No. Yeah. Years later, after everything came out with me, I remember talking to her, who's now a pretty good friend of mine. And she was like saying, I don't remember exactly what she said to me at first, but
the intern, right? Saying, your intern friend?
Yeah, that I thought was his wife originally when I first saw them. And she was like, yeah, he was very touchy with me too and huggy, and it was weird for me, but I just eventually it became normalized same way it did with me. I think I mentioned I was living in a girl's house. I feel like God told me I needed to move out. It was just too much. I didn't have enough space. I connect with Ben via Eric, and I ultimately get the internship with him. I don't remember the timeline, but he did invite me to come live with them. He's like, hey, Jen, who was my landlord at the time, mentioned that you're looking for a room, and we have a spare room. My kids are stoked, and we'd love to have you come live with them. I don't think at that time I had even really met his kids or wife. I just had seen them. So I move in with him. I'm interning with him. And then I don't know the timeline, like how quickly he began being really, like, he was always very touchy. I remember he like hugged me right away. But over time and over the course of a year of living with them, like daily, it was hearing things like, you need to trust me. I'm a father. Like, there's like, I would hear things about like how gifted I was from him, and like he wanted to like mentor my gifts and be a father figure to me, that I was a daughter, and these things were normalized. Like seeking out mothers and fathers was like encouraged in this culture. It was not weird. It was kind of weird to me because I'm a very private person. So it was hard for me to open up to this man. And he would tell me things like, you know, you really struggle with vulnerability. He knew that my relationship with my parents was pretty rough, and I was sorting that out. At this time, I was 21 when I went to school in ministry. I'm 23 when I began interning with him. And so I'm still, and just very naive. I had no life experience. This was my first life experience, really. But I would hear things like, trust me, hug me, touch me. It's okay. I'm a father. I'm trusted. I'm trustworthy. There's so many things just daily, constantly for this whole time that I knew him.
Can you give us an example of like how or when he would say touch me or hold me? Just kind of like, I know, for instance, we've heard other people's stories where they're like sitting on a bench maybe, and he puts his arm around them, and are you uncomfortable? You know, so do you have any memory of like, how did that even happen or come up?
I do remember like sitting one-on-one with him, having coffee dates with him, that he would call it, and then like, you know, we'd sit next to each other. We worked together. I was his intern. I lived with him, so it was pretty much everywhere.
Tell us a little bit too about, I've never heard of this before, but you said there was like a spiritual adoption ceremony.
Yeah.
Almost. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly when it was. Clearly, I was like very ingrained in the family at this point. I became very, very close with his kids. They were like my little buddies. And I was pretty close with his wife. I would help her on like photo shoots, and I really tried to like connect with her. They were going through a ton in their marriage, and I saw that, and I really felt like, you know, helping a lot. I would babysit a lot, encourage them to go on dates like for the weekends, and I'd watch the kids. So I became like a very integral part of their family. I knew Ben's parents very well. I had been getting to know people in their circle, and I lived with them. So I don't remember how it began, but ultimately they did like a spiritual adoption ceremony to like spiritually adopt me into the Armstrong family. And I have a very vague memory of being in his parents' backyard. I feel like somebody like washed my feet. That was like a normal thing at the time. A very like Jesus-like thing to do, I guess. And then I remember like maybe they're all very Scottish, and I share Scottish heritage, and that was like very coveted to them. So that kind of helped even like ingrain me even further into the family. I remember his parents were there. They were there. I believe the kids were there. Kind of a memory of them running around, and then some like mutual friends that maybe his parents had kind of mentored. I have one girl that I remember being there. They gave me like family heirlooms, like a piece of their Scottish tartan, which is like their Scottish kilt colors, their clan colors. So that was like basically like, you know, saying here's a piece of our family heirloom and adopting me into the family. Ben had given me like a ring and other gifts, and that's pretty much all I remember about
that. He gave you a ring from him to you?
I don't know if that was the ring that he gave me then, but he did wind up giving me a ring that he got me at one point, like a father ring.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
There's really just this drawing into the family, and even pointing out the Scottish heritage and all these things, and it makes you think, you know, in the case of Ben and the situation there, that there's this process of making you feel so at home and so welcome, while at the same time saying, hug me, touch me, hold me. This is what fathers and daughters do. And so at this time, you're like, well, I'm uncomfortable, but at the same time, you're like not thinking anything that Ben's trying to make a move on you, or that wasn't in your head. You weren't like, and you had told us, I mean, this was definitely not something that you were trying to publicize, but you said, like, I wasn't interested in Ben. I wasn't interested in a relationship with anybody at this time of my life.
Yeah.
Maybe you can speak to that for just a second.
Yeah, like I said, I came to Bethel to like really heal, and I loved Jesus, I loved God, and that was my goal. I really wanted to get to know God. I knew that in doing that, I would be able to heal. So that was my motive. I never wanted to date. I maybe had a crush on like one person in school ministry, but I was not interested in any of these people. I knew that eventually I wanted to start dating and like get married, but that was never my focus. And I think anyone who knows me from that time would agree. Like that was never, I'm just not like that. I've never been that kind of person. And it was uncomfortable for me, like very uncomfortable to like let Ben kind of weasel his way into my whatever. But I also at the same time was like, it just feels so good to be loved by somebody like this, like a real father. And he was a hero to me. I really did want to be like him. And I just really genuinely loved him like a father. I was never in love with him. I never loved him like that. And I didn't know that that was happening. Like, my walls are slowly being like chipped away. I'm like being more and more vulnerable with him. And I have a really good memory of him taking me on like a spiritual, like father-daughter walk. We go to the Sundial Bridge. We're walking through the Arboretum. He's talking to me about, why aren't you dating? Like, what are you looking for in a date and like a guy? And I was like, remember being like, this is so uncomfortable, but like, I never had those kind of talks from my real dad. So it was like, yes, I do. Like, I've never really had somebody ask me this. I really do want to find a person. This is kind of who I'm looking for. And I remember giving him examples. And he was like, I remember in my mind being like, wow, he really does love me like a father. Like if he's having this talk with me, then I feel like I need to trust him. This is how I'm going to heal, by truly like allowing him in and being vulnerable. I think at the same time, he made me be blood brothers with him. Like, I think either I had a cut or he had a cut, and then he cut his hand and made me be blood brothers. And a little bit weird for me, but also I was so used to like over the top spiritual stuff that I didn't really second guess it. And I thought he was like my really good buddy and like a father figure. So I just kind of went along with it.
Do you remember anything about that, like anything more you can tell us? I feel like that sounds so strange for a grown married man to become blood brothers with, his intern.
I don't remember anything else really. I just have this memory that's kind of blurry. I do remember I had a female kind of mentor at the time and telling her about it, and she was like, that's freaking weird. Like,
so
no.
you did tell people some of the stuff that was happening while it was happening?
This would have been later. This would have been after
gotcha.
Everything blew up. I had this woman in my life who was our neighbor. Her name's Cheri. Her and her husband recently came forward with a statement to Ron Cantor.
Yes, I read the statement.
Yeah, that's the connection there. But
So you're on these walks, and he's like, you can, like, later, it's all hindsight, obviously, but you can just see, like, okay, he's asking these questions not so that he can help me find somebody for my life, but so that he can make me break down my walls and be more vulnerable, more connected to him. And that's just what he did. And then this crazy, like, blood brothers. I totally remember that type of stuff from like the 90s and early 2000s, how like people were like, you got to do this. And I was always scared. I hated cutting myself. So friends would be like, dude, let's do this. I'm like, no way. But I can totally imagine in a prophetic community like that, where it's like broken the walls down, and then you have a leader telling you this is what we need to do. I mean, I just hate that happened for you. I'm so annoyed by it, and I'm sorry that happened. But it was another way that he physically broke you down to break a wall that is very, very, very wrong. And so, yeah,
just all these ways it seems like to create this false connection with you. Like even the spiritual adoption ceremony sounds nice, like a nice idea, but also all these ways of forcing you to feel like he's your spiritual father, and that you guys are deeply connected.
Okay, so I just use this as an example for how closeness was reinforced and normalized. I have a very strong memory of I was living with them. It was like probably summertime, maybe mid to end of summer in Reading. It's very warm at night. I remember being like, I want to sleep outside tonight. I was hanging out with the kids, jumping on the trampoline, and then I wound up just deciding to bring my sleeping bag out and sleep on the trampoline. Um, Ben then came out and hung out with me and wound up sleeping next to me in his own sleeping bag or bedding or whatever. I remember being like, what the heck? Like, this is a little bit weird. Like, but I could see Heather inside. She was on her computer doing, like, editing her photos, working. I knew she knew we were out there. I have a memory of her coming out and speaking to us. And so I was like, okay, this must be like safe and okay. I don't remember if he stayed the night out there with me, but for a while we did sleep next to each other on the trampoline. And that's all I remember about that. But I think, like I said, it's just an example of how, like, I thought, like, everything was so normalized. The closeness and the, like, sleeping in close proximity had become normalized to me. And I just, like, I definitely had a conscience and, like, my own red flags, but I didn't know. I had heard so much that I need to deny my own conscience to trust him. And so I just, eventually all my walls were broken down.
It makes sense. And it makes sense too, because it's another one of those things where you're like, well, we're in public. Everyone sees it. Literally, his wife's inside and she seems to be okay
Which
with
makes
it, so
you
it must
wonder
be
how much of
okay.
his situation with his wife was grooming her to believe
That's
that
what I
all
was
of this
gonna
was
say.
normalized.
I don't want to like speculate too
Probably.
much, but I can't imagine the level of gaslighting she went through in order to be okay with him sleeping outside with you on the trampoline. Like,
Yeah.
there's no wife that is okay with that, like, naturally. So, yeah, it's not okay.
Yeah, and we
You're probably
overly use the gaslight word in our culture, but that's exactly what it would have to be in
There's
the situation.
no way you're okay
Like,
with that naturally. It had to have been. Like, this is the perfect time to use the word gaslighting, because that's the only way that anyone would be okay with it. She was probably made to feel crazy.
To question any connection that he was having with you. So, okay.
Which, unfortunately, again, not to dive too much into somebody else's story, but shows like the manipulation. The grooming wasn't just you. He had to groom his entire family, including his parents, if they're the ones like hosting your spiritual adoption ceremony.
The brother and sister, or the siblings, which later you'll talk about that with the
everyone on leadership, everyone at Bethel, everyone in the school. So it's just, it's not okay.
Yeah. So
my first memory is me in the kitchen. I'm making a sandwich. I think I'm going to go hang out at the girls' house or with some friends. It's afternoon because it's very light in the house, and I'm making a sandwich on the cutting board. I remember my back is to the wall, to the rest of the kitchen. Ben comes up behind me and hugs me unwelcomed and unexpectedly from behind, and it's like a very close sexual hug. And I, like, now that I understand trauma after, being in therapy and having licensed professionals help me to see these things, I understand now that my trauma response is very much freeze and very much fawn. So that means I freeze up and I lock up, or I just, for whatever messed up reason, go along with things to keep peace and not have any kind of loss. So I immediately freeze up. I remember being angry and like not knowing what to do. He's hugging me very uncomfortably. His son then walks in the kitchen and he drops me and leaves the room. And I was like, what the heck? I remember being frozen and being like, I'm angry. I need to leave right now. So I grabbed my sandwich, I grabbed my stuff. I remember being really mad at him, like maybe giving him a dirty look, and then going to the girls' house and telling some of my girlfriends. At this girl's house I had moved out of, I had 3 really good friends, and I remember telling them what happened, and they were like, "Girl, that's weird. You need to tell Scott," who was one of my other mentors. Like, Scott at the time was one of Bill's right-hand men, just a really good person in my life, and I actually met him for coffee often, and I remember Ben being very jealous of my, like, mentorship with him. So I wouldn't tell Ben whenever I was having coffee with him. but sometimes he'd see me. So then I called Scott. I was super nervous. I call Scott. I tell him what happened in the kitchen. He tells me, that feels like a red flag. It's probably time to move out, Sarah. He's like, you're living with him and working with him. He's a married man. That's a red flag. I think you need to move out. And so I was like crying. I'm like, okay, that's what needs to happen. I want to listen to Scott. I was a very obedient person and I really respected people. So my true nature was to like, well, shoot, now I got to figure out where to live. At the time, this has now become like my whole world. My dreams are wrapped up in Ben. He is my spiritual authority. It's my home. It's my family. It's like, I loved his kids so much. I was so like, I didn't want to abandon them. I knew their marriage was struggling. And I was like telling myself, okay, maybe I just over dramatize this. I know Ben loves me like a father. He has been very touchy with me. Like maybe I just made this up. So I talked myself out of it. I deny my own conscience and I decide to stay because in the name of like, I know that me being here means I can watch the kids, they can work on their marriage, go on dates, and I didn't want to lose everything. I really felt like I didn't have the capacity at the time. I was also not doing very well, I think, because of this like long period of like grooming or whatever confusing stuff was going on. So ultimately I decided to stay, and that's something that for a long time really messed with me and gave me a lot of guilt. I think I told myself, you know, if I had listened to Scott and moved out, nothing would have ever happened. And so I took on a lot of guilt and responsibility for these things happening because I chose to stay and not listen to one of my spiritual mentors who told me to leave. So it took me a long time to not have that guilt.
Yeah, and you did a great job explaining all of that, and I know that's hard to tell and talk about. And, you know, the process of breaking you down to get you to that point in the kitchen was a long process. And it makes sense why you would justify or think, because when you say my dreams were wrapped up in Ben, it's not like your dreams were wrapped up in him as a future this, that, or the other. It was like you were a spiritual daughter to him. You were watching their marriage. You were trying to take care of the kids so that they could go on dates and so on and so forth. But the situation, and I know we had talked about this the other day, and I just want to mention this, and this is not to hammer at somebody else that you really care about and appreciate, because in one instance, it's like Eric Johnson was a solid person in your life and recommended Ben. And we can't fault him overall, like, oh, it's not his fault. It's just the culture was created to, hey, go be his spiritual daughter. That should not be the culture anywhere. Go be their spiritual daughter. Go get under this man. You know, that's not how it should work, especially women to men. It just doesn't make sense. But then this guy, Scott, it really shows me that what Bill Johnson said last week, he said, I don't confront well. That's what Bill Johnson said about Shawn Bolz. I don't confront well. I delay.
And I have this horrible trait of just not confronting well, and sometimes I'm just afraid of getting it wrong, so I just avoid it altogether. And
well, we've heard that the culture is really, you know, it's all about calling out the golden people and believing for the best, but confrontation is not a thing that culture does. And so it creates opportunities like this where Scott, who's right hand to Bill Johnson, knows that you were held from behind in a kitchen in a overtly intimate type of way, or hugged by Ben Armstrong. And instead of Scott going to Bill Johnson and going to leadership and going to Ben and just saying, hey, dude, you can't hug girls this way. In fact, you need to step away from this position. See, he should have been removed from that position immediately when that was known by Bill Johnson's right-hand man. But Scott instead trusted you as a 23-year-old to make that decision. Hey, get out of that house and do this, that, and the other. When you didn't get out, he should have gone to Ben and gone to Bill, etc. My point is to say that the culture is the problem, where it allows for these types of things to continue.
It's interesting how even in the beginning you said they wanted you to have a covering for protection. They want you to have a spiritual father. It's like all of these ideas and things that they are saying they're implementing. But whenever it comes to when you really need somebody, you called out to somebody, you called out to a spiritual father, and you said, hey, this happened to me. This isn't okay. This is wrong. And he did give you good advice, obviously.
Right.
Like, he gave you good advice. He said the right thing. He saw the red flag. But as a spiritual father, as a leader, just as a guy, just as a dude at church, he should go to somebody and be like, she's not safe. She's not in a safe place. Ben Armstrong's
And
not a
neither
safe person.
neither is any woman in Ben Armstrong's influence, because he walks up to girls that are not his wife and hugs them from behind.
Right.
Like,
So to me, that's a culture of protection. That's
Yes.
a culture of honor. That's a culture of, wanting to see young people in a safe place and flourish, is calling out those things instead of leaving it up to the, intern to have to make those decisions. And also, like you said, people need to understand like the whole grooming process of, for a year, he showed you all these ways he was your spiritual father. He showed you all these ways you were loved, all these ways you were part of the family, all these ways you could trust him. So yeah, an incident in the kitchen, it's easy to talk yourself out of and be like, oh no,
maybe he wasn't being sexual.
I'm sure it
Maybe
wasn't,
he was just hugging
I have
me.
all this year of instances where he was
Right.
my spiritual father.
Right. Maybe you can tell us about Ben, how he would take your spiritual revelations that you told him privately, and he would stand in front and tell those.
Yeah, at the time, so another thing, like in me saying, my dreams were wrapped up in him and like his spiritual authority and stuff, is like we were pioneering like a lot of like prophetic stuff on our own. We had our own kind of like group we were trying to establish, and that's a whole story in itself. But anyways, there were things that like I was getting a revelation from God on, little things I would share with him, and I would notice he would like say them when he was preaching or to students, and I remember being like, that's what I told you God told me. And ultimately I did at one point approach him and say, hey, like I told you that, like you're pretending like God told you that when I did. And I remember him saying something like, well, I thought we were a team. I can share what you share with me and you could do the same. I don't care. And I wasn't like preaching at the time. Like I hate being in front of people. So I wasn't like sharing my revelations publicly, maybe like with my fellow students, but basically like we're a team and I can, whatever you tell me, I can tell people.
But he was saying it like he had gotten the revelation, or he was saying like God showed him, or...
Yeah, publicly. It seemed that way, but it was something I had told him, God told me. There were a few things like that, but...
That is wild.
Would tell us what happened with the Scottish Games incident and just how that ended up taking place.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to the Scottish Games with his family. This is like different Scottish clans go and you do like traditional Scottish games and bagpipes and the whole shebang, but I think I had gone to one already with them. I know Heather and the kids came to one. This particular one, I don't remember exactly where it was. I believe in the Bay Area. We had been staying there. We went for the day and then we stayed at his brother, I think his sister and brother-in-law's house. Brother-in-law or sister, I can't remember. But anyways, his siblings' house, they have kids. There's a bunch of people staying there. I find out when we get there, we're sharing a room, him and I, Ben and I. Which I'm like, okay, that's like a little bit weird. Like maybe I should tell Heather.
The family set that up, or maybe Ben told the family like, hey, we can just stay in a room together. Nobody knows, but you show up and there's a bunk bed and that's your room with Ben, apparently.
Yeah. I do remember thinking this is a little bit weird. Maybe I should mention this to his wife, but I'm sure they all know. And then I just like, things got busy and I dismissed it. As I mentioned before, and have given an example of how like us being that close in proximity, even sleeping near each other, was normalized and seemingly okay. I feel fine. Like this is a dad type figure to me. I'm not in love with this man. I don't want to be physical with this man. So I'm sleeping on the top bunk. The bottom bunk has been moved over to the wall. So we're not sleeping next to each other, but we're in the same room on different beds. I remember him getting up to use the bathroom and I was awake. It was summertime. It was very hot. I'm an athlete and I was wearing a sports bra and like basketball shorts or whatever because it was hot and I was trying to cool down to sleep. He leaves the room, the light shines on me as he like opens the door, and I'm like, oh no, he's gonna see me. And then he comes back in from the bathroom and starts touching me inappropriately, and I remember completely freezing and not knowing what to do and not stopping it because I didn't really know how to, and I didn't want to make things seem awkward, or like I said, my responses are freeze and fawn, and that's exactly what I did in that moment. He's touching me. I don't remember everything, but ultimately we wind up, he pulls me down and I'm in the bed with him. We never had sex, we never kissed, but sexual boundaries were crossed. At this time in my life, purity is very important to me. I had never had sex. Keeping my virginity for my husband was extremely important to me. This is like part of the culture. So this is my first sexual experience. Sex never happened, kissing never happened because I did not want that to happen, and I was able to stop it to some degree, but sexual boundaries were crossed that I did not stop. So I remember the next morning being like panicking, and him saying like, you know who we are, to the prophetic and mystic movement, to our people, you know how important we are. This was just a spiritual attack and we passed. Like, we don't need to tell anybody. We didn't do anything. That could have been a lot worse. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like, we don't need to tell anybody. But I'm not the kind of person that can hide anything. I'm very like, if something's going on in my life, either you can tell someone's going to figure it out, or I'm going to tell on myself. Days after that, I have no memory of. I don't remember what happened after. I don't remember leaving that place. I don't remember the family. It's all lost to me.
First and foremost, someone set up that room for you to be staying in a room with him. But someone else had groomed you to think that sleeping next to him was okay, and that was him. And he had groomed his wife to make it okay for you to be laying next to him on a trampoline and sleeping next to him outside. And so this process
and
created
even his family, like you said, like this is at his sister or brother's house.
It's wild.
And they think it's like appropriate for their sibling who's married to stay in this room. It's also strange, and it just shows you the like master manipulator that he is to convince all these people, not just you.
Yeah.
Yet you are not the only one that was fooled by him. There are all these people who he manipulated to think that this was okay or this was normal.
I had moved out. I don't remember if I had moved out before the Scottish Games, but things were weird. I think it was like over the course of maybe a week or two where the Scottish Games happened. Probably texting and still working together and trying to act like things were normal. Then there's a day or a night where I don't remember exactly, but we were probably talking or texting, and he's like, hey, come over. It'll be like old times. Heather's out of town. I could use help with the kids. So I thought the kids were going to be there. And I remember very much being like, I don't want anything to happen. I'm afraid. Like, I don't want, like, that's just not who we are. Like, at this point, I'm also like, I don't want anyone to, like, I don't want anyone's lives to be ruined. I don't want Ben to lose his job. I'm still very protective of this family, and I love them very much. So he invites me over. I think the kids are there. He says, we'll watch a movie. It'll be like old times, and I need to make sure that nothing's going to happen. Like, I don't want any of this. And so he assures me, like, that was just a test. Like, clearly we passed that. Like you said before, that was the enemy just attacking us. You know who we are. Like, we can prove that this is okay. So I get there. He's got like a 6-pack of Newcastle Brown Ale. At the time, I didn't really drink. I had started drinking when I was living with them. He drank quite a bit. Like, I remember there was times like before he'd go to school in the morning, or teach, he would easily drink like a bottle of wine, like whiskey, beer.
I'm sorry. I want you to keep going. But in the morning before he would teach?
No, the night before. Sorry.
Oh, okay, I was thinking
the night before, like morning. That'd be hardcore.
Okay, gotcha.
So I had like a really healthy appreciation for like beer and like distilled like whiskeys and scotches. I really like the art and still do to this day, like of beer making and stuff like that. But I was very tiny. I barely drank. I was in school ministry. A lot of kids partied and drank, but it was not encouraged. And I really wanted to be a good example to my students. So I didn't, like, I'd go out and have a beer or two. Or at the house, I would drink with Ben and Heather. Um, uh, but I get there and the kids are gone. He's arranged for the kids to go stay the night with friends or something. And so it's just him and I at the house. And I'm like, great. Like, okay, I'm just going to have to trust that this isn't weird. I have a couple beers. He gives me a couple beers. He's also, I think, drinking. I'm not sure. But I like a couple beers was like it for me, like very light lagers or whatever, brown ales. He keeps giving me beer, and by this point, I think I've probably had 4 or 5 beers, and I'm like, I can't drive now, so I have to stay here. We're watching a movie. I'm sitting away from him. Ultimately, he pulls me onto his lap, takes my shirt off, and sexual boundaries are crossed again. I don't remember much, except I know that we wound up on the couch together, and ultimately he pulled me into the room, and like I said, like I never had sex, never kissed. Sexual boundaries were crossed. I have a memory of him dragging my arms, like trying to drag me into the room with him, not like on the ground, but he's pulling me. And I remember saying no out loud at least once or twice. And I now understand that I was like likely dissociated, because this whole memory to me, I see it as if I'm watching it from the corner of the room. I don't think I was even in my body, if that even makes sense. But I think I was frozen and completely disassociated, and that's how I see this memory, as if it was like a movie that I was watching from the corner. I can like see myself there. We wind up in bed together. The next morning, I'm like traumatized, like completely confused, probably still dissociated, and I don't really have much memory of that day or the days after. But that was the last time anything physical happened. I remember being super angry. I remember like completely imploding. I couldn't eat. I was super sick. I was angry. I was going to work and people were like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you so like, something's not right? And I was mad at them. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, leave me alone. And just like really not doing well.
Just the way that you're telling the story, you know, what happened to you is so, so different than everything that has been said about it for the past 16 years from the stage and on podcast and in the book Unpunishable. What happened to you was a crime. It was a crime, and they've rebranded this as an affair and created some sort of like restoration blueprint for pastors everywhere to get back on stage as soon as possible. And it's just all a lie. It's all a lie, and it's so wrong. So I'm so sorry, first of all, that happened to you. It's not right. It's evil. I'm just so sorry. And then I'm sorry for, I just can't imagine having it handled this way afterwards, having him paraded on stage, telling your trauma was his testimony, and everyone clapped for it. Everyone celebrated it. Everyone celebrated this, and it's just very wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah. It's thank you for sharing that, because when I listen to Ben Armstrong, and he says in his clips with Jay Valentin and on others, he basically says, in a matter of 2 weekends, I had an affair on my wife, is what he says. And then he says the phrase is, I was getting my emotional needs met, and then it turned physical with a woman I worked with. And then he said, someone I worked with, or a lady that knew our kids.
And getting more and more of my emotional needs met by another woman.
It's all really hard. Like for a long time, I just took all of this. Like early on took on too much of the blame. I confused like my own self-reflection and what happened, because I really believe in extreme ownership and trying to figure out where I went wrong. Right off the bat, I took a lot of responsibility on myself and just took it for a long time. It has been extremely confusing to deconstruct what happened and figure it out, but not until this last summer was I able to start like looking at some of these interviews, because I'm in a really good place now. But yeah, the first one I watched was him saying that, you know, I had an affair with this woman that my kids knew, and then things like I was getting my needs met. Made me feel like clearly used, you know, like getting my needs met. I wasn't getting my needs met. Like that was never something for me. I think he wasn't doing well in his marriage and maybe loved me a lot more than I thought, in a different way than I thought. So yeah, hearing those things was really, really hard for me, and actually gave me a little bit of fire to start talking, because I'm finally able to watch these things. And that's why I told the whole story of the spiritual adoption and how ingrained I was in this family and how close I was with his kids. They were my little buddies, and that was actually, that whole portion of hurting them was extremely hard for me. I did not want to hurt anybody. But yeah, so watching him and Danny's interview, lots of things that they say are just such lies, and not how I saw things. And yeah.
Speaking of Danny's interview, did you want to mention something from that interview, Christina?
Well, I do. I want to go back to that, but I wanted to real quick hear, you told us that after this happened, you felt like you wanted to basically confess to leadership, and he encouraged you not to. I think that's an important part of
this. Just never do it again.
Yeah.
And we will hide this. And I can remember a Friday night service, guy named, what was his name? Jason Valentin. he was preaching a sermon about living in the light.
No way.
And meanwhile, I'm sitting on the front row living in the dark.
Dude, I always forget about this.
No, it was real deal. And I was like, the conviction of the Lord just hit me. I'm like, you know what? I'm living in the dark. I'm hiding this. I need to come clean. And I can remember coming clean, sitting with you and Mark Brooks, telling you about what's going on in my life.
Yeah, I remember that.
But Sarah, who came clean first? Tell us about how you were trying to come clean and what Ben was doing. Tell us the real story.
Yeah, I remember I was trying to act like everything was normal. I was pretty angry at him. I was trying not to show that, but I'm not very good at like hiding those feelings. And I went to one of his, probably an AMT, advanced ministry training at one of the Bethel offshoot campuses. I remember him preaching, telling the students like revelations that I had told him again. And then his wife is there. She used to never ever go to his like stuff. And I remember just being like, I have to like tell somebody. I was completely imploding. And I remember asking him, like, do you have any friends? Is there anybody that, 'cause he didn't have any friends. Like he knew these people, but nobody knew anything really about him. And I remember over time, like telling him, like, it's good to have like friendships and like go to men's groups and stuff. Like, but I was like, is there anyone you can tell? 'Cause I don't know what to do. And he basically was like, we don't need to tell anybody. We've already talked about this. Clearly it's not going to happen again. It was all a test. And I'm like, I don't remember much about how I was other than feeling angry. But I remember he grabbed the pastor walking by behind him and was like, hey, pray for Sarah. She's having a bad day. And so he prays for me and Ben leaves. So I'm pretty angry. I mentioned Cheri, a kind of mother figure that I had in my life. At that time, I was like going over to her and her husband's house a lot. Two of my friends and I spent a lot of time over there. Cheri, I did not remember a lot of details of this time until they just put out their narrative and letter.
And we'll read that statement in here. We'll put that in. Okay, friends, I'm going to go ahead and read this post from the couple who originally confronted the leadership at Bethel over the essay of Sarah. It says, the former intern, Sarah, is who he's referring to here, seems determined to bring her story to light, and we choose to serve her in this regard and offer truth and witness to whatever platform she chooses whenever she chooses. It is true that Bethel leadership knew the context of Ben's behavior from us. Not only did I confront leaders I personally knew, but Cheri also wrote Chris in the weeks that followed, outlining the truth in detail. She also met with the woman at Bethel who was tasked by leadership to counsel the intern, so Cheri could share her insights. This was eventually met with a "you are carrying an offense" or "you must be wounded yourself" attitude. John says, there is a timeline from 16 years ago that is hard to remember, but I believe the public announcement of Ben and the intern, which is Sarah, which was on stage at BSSM, was fairly quick. Maybe they didn't fully grasp the depth of what had happened and drew their own conclusions before considering a more in-depth investigation. The intern was absolutely gutted at that point, and I could only imagine that she just walked wherever they directed. Please know that I'm not trying to make excuses for their actions. I still can't believe that I'm having this conversation. It is also important to know that Ben didn't honorably confess to what he was doing, but that the young lady confessed to Cheri after she shared with the intern regarding dreams that God had given her. That is when Cheri contacted Danny Silk at the intern's request. She asked her who she wanted to contact, and everything happened from there. Ben was at the church that day. When Cheri pulled up in the parking lot, the intern was telling Ben at the time that she was going to bring everything forward. Cheri saw Ben standing behind the foyer glass, watching the intern come out and get into the car with her. In the weeks preceding the exposure, Ben knew that the intern was friends with Cheri and warned her from staying away from Cheri. He told the intern that Cheri wasn't a safe person. The intern shared this with us. The truly disgusting part of this whole thing is that an entire ministry was built out of this event. And he's referring to Unpunishable by Danny Silk. Ben was not just restored, but was validated by leadership as trustworthy leader with established authority and influence. Multiple interviews, articles, and book references capitalize on the seemingly miraculous restoration of Ben, his marriage, and his ministry. His story is celebrated far and wide. Unfortunately, it is not built on the bedrock of Christ, but on the bones and lifeblood of the intern, Sarah. God help them and help me to continue to forgive them. I want you to know that I had Cheri proofread this letter to you for accuracy. The one thing she noted was that she didn't pull Danny from a meeting. Instead, she went to Danny's personal assistant and said she needed to contact him immediately. She then received a call from Danny a few minutes later. Danny asked what was going on, and Cheri said that the intern wanted to speak with him. He then asked, "Is this about her and Ben?" And Cheri said yes. Apparently, he already knew something was wrong, but we don't know how he knew.
Yeah, long story short, I believe she approaches me and is like, what's going on? Something's not right. You are losing weight. You're angry. And I'm like, I didn't know how to tell. I was afraid to destroy people's lives. I was still very much protecting people. And I tell her what happened. I don't remember the details of what I told her, but I told her, and I remember her saying, you need to tell somebody. If you don't tell somebody, I'm going to. Who do you want to talk to? I don't remember saying Danny, but apparently I did. In my mind, I probably would have told Scott or Danny because I really trusted Danny at the time. And so I did. I don't remember the details of telling, but ultimately I wound up maybe the next day in a room with 6 to 8 of Bethel's men upper leadership who I really loved and trusted. But as a young girl, I was like, I need a female in here. And I remember asking if I could bring Scott's wife in with me, who I was pretty close with as well, but she was around, and I remember being like, can she come in with me? I don't remember if she did or not, but the being in the room with all those men is also extremely hard for me to talk about because it was so vulnerable, and I was taking on all this blame and having all these men sit there and stare at me and try to tell them every detail of what happened.
Yeah, that's tough. That's very hard.
Do you remember anything from that meeting that anyone said to you or anything like that? No.
I don't remember who it was, but someone was like, and I should have just kicked them all out, but somebody asked me, it might have been, I don't remember who it was. Is there anybody in here you don't want in here? And I felt like if I say I don't want them in here, then it means like I'm hiding something, and I wanted them to know that I was really trying to like bring this all to light and make things right. And in my mind, I was like, this can all be made right. Like, and this is the beginning of how I do that. And I remember saying I didn't want Jason Valentin in there. I made Jason Valentin leave. But I wish that I had been like strong enough to say, hey, like, this is uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Can I? Yeah.
Danny Silk, when he was speaking to Ben Armstrong and Heather on his podcast, and I'll play this clip here, but he said, we offered her the same support, but she chose a different path.
We offered her all the same support and services. You guys were obviously trying to save a whole family, and you jumped in with both feet, and she took a different path than you guys did, but she's still in our environment.
What do you make of that statement?
I just listened to that recently too, and that was like infuriating and just painful. I don't feel that is true. I think that that's a lie. Ben had been around these people since he was 3 years old, from the beginning of Waverville and Bethel's like origin story. So I just felt like I was like outnumbered, and I felt like they had all surrounded him, and it felt very unsafe for me to be like, hey, I need help too. I felt like they were trying to make me disappear. They didn't know what to do with me. And I do believe that they think they were doing the right thing, especially given that I kind of took a lot of the responsibility on originally and blame. I kind of began with that, like, this is all my fault. I don't want them to lose their jobs. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I need to make this right. I don't recall them really helping me at all. In fact, it's a very like dark time for me where I just feel so alone, and I start like deciding to like push people away and just keep the right people close to me. I remember them just feeling like they wanted me to disappear, so I intentionally got a job at the coffee shop. Everything in me wanted to leave and run away. I think a lot of people would have done that, but I remember telling myself, no, this is my home too. Like, this is my faith, my dreams, my family. This is all I know. I can't just leave and run. And I knew I was hurt, and I didn't want to be like a Christian statistic of someone that's wounded by the church and runs. So I decided to face my stuff the best that I could, even though I had no support. And I get the job at the coffee shop. My friends work there, and I'm like, this is a way to make them see that I'm here still every day. I remember thinking, like, they have to walk out every day from the sanctuary and see my face here and know that I still exist and that I'm not going anywhere. I'm really proud of myself for that, because I feel like people expected me to go away. And I was like not doing good at that time. I was imploding and I was angry still, but I was trying to like heal. So yeah, Danny, to go back to that, I was talking to my friend about this, like, what support did they give me after we watched Danny's podcast with Ben from like 7 or 8 years ago, and he says that he offered me the same support, but I chose a different path. That's not true. I thought it was pretty short after, but my friend reminded me that it was over a year later, where I was in a church service and Danny preached on shame, and I was bawling because I have so much shame. I have all of this like institutional abuse and like confusion, and I wind up approaching Danny and being like, I have all this shame. I don't know what to do. I'm not healing. I'm stuck. And he's like, well, what do you want us to do? And I'm like, I guess I was hoping for them to like pull me into some community. And I was like, well, clearly, like, it doesn't feel like you want me here. And I was like, there's this ministry. These people go to Bethel, but they had their own healing ministry outside of Bethel. They're, I think, actually licensed counselors. And it was like a 3-day intensive, but I couldn't afford it. And I told Danny I wanted to do it. And Danny and Cheri paid for me to go to that. I believe that I can remember that's the only thing they did for me. And it wasn't until I sought them out over a year later for support. And that was very helpful for me, that 3-day intensive I did. But
So it's not that they were trying to help you and offering you the same support. You came a year later and said, please help. And he's like, well, what do you want us to do? And you're like, well, there's this licensed counselor. And he said, okay, fine, we'll pay for it. Or yeah, we'll pay for it. It's very, like, I want to mention something that they said on this podcast, and I'll actually play this clip as well right here.
This girl is working in the coffee shop.
Yeah. And
where you go every day.
And where I meet with my students all the time.
And your children cross paths.
yes, because they attend the school.
Most people run away.
Mm-hmm.
Most people call it a fresh start.
Yeah.
Yep.
Most people won't face the maturity required of a mess like this.
Yeah.
So again, you know, I keep coming back to, you're my heroes.
You're my heroes. And I thought it's so interesting that just before he tells them how great they are for staying, he mentions that you're still there at the coffee shop.
This girl is working in the coffee shop where you go every day, but she's still in our environment to this day.
And it's almost like a leadership blind spot in this culture of honor. By the way, at the beginning of that interview, he says that they are an example of the culture of honor.
We're going to talk about really the fruit of the approach in a culture of honor and how it really set you up to succeed. We refer to it over and over as the culture of honor, and there's a lot of dynamics that go to that. If people watching this are familiar with that, you are the living examples of that process and it happening.
He says that they are the example of the unpunishable and the culture of honor. And it's a blind spot in Bethel's leadership, which Bill Johnson was made aware of and admitted to a week and a half ago, that they do not value what I've heard behind the scenes Chris Valentin calls the little people, the normal people. They don't value them at the same level as the Ben Armstrongs because he's a example of the unpunishable. He's an example of honor culture. Even in that same interview, Heather kind of Freudian slip, but she says, you know, I wondered if you guys were just doing this because Danny just put out the book, Honor Culture.
I had just written Culture of Honor the year before, I think.
So I thought maybe they were keeping Ben along because they were testing out if the book really worked.
We're just propping this book up.
Yeah. Wait, if we don't do this, like I just wrote a book that says this works.
So no, but
And this had to work. This process had to work to prove that honor culture works. And I went at the expense of you, who was there begging to. Most girls would have run away. You did not run away. You stayed there out of, number one, you really loved the Lord. You were like, I just want to love the Lord. I want to stay in community. And instead of embracing you into community, we see this podcast years later where he's saying, you guys didn't run. Y'all are my heroes. But you're actually a hero in this story. You know, you did say about the aftermath of what you lost. I just want you to talk about that, the aftermath of all of this, what was really lost.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately I see it now as like getting out and being able to really heal, and I'm grateful that I was able to come to that point. It was incredibly dark. I feel like I tried to like fake it and pretend that everything was okay, but I was like those few years after, I just like don't remember. I remember thinking like if I could just fast forward time, 5 years from now so I can be out of all of this. I was incredibly alone. People who had like pledged like covenant friendship and relationship to me turned their backs on me, at least what I thought. Stopped talking to me. I lost everything. I lost my faith. I lost my community, my family, who I was, my identity. And I had to like start all over. And it was hard for a very, very long time. Very, very dark, very hard. Thank God I did have a really good group of friends that I I started dancing. I went to the college and I was like, I need to like have some kind of creative outlet. I signed up for college and I started dancing every day, and that for me was like just super healing. And in that I met this group of girls who like are my best friends to this day. We've all been in each other's weddings. I'm like, God was good to me and like giving me the right people at the time that I needed, and I kept the right people close, and it was just a very small circle of people I knew I could trust. I didn't trust anybody. Everyone knew me. Like, this was publicized. Bethel's globally known. This whole thing went public. So everyone knew it was me. I couldn't go anywhere without people approaching me, asking me questions, trying to pray for me. It was pretty rough. And honestly, like, I could say so much more, but words don't do that time for me any justice. Like, it was horrible.
Well, we are so thankful for you just stepping forward. I really feel like this is going to clarify a lot for so many. And, you've walked through it and you've healed on your own with help outside of Bethel. But part of this, even for us as we talk to folks in your type of situation, is realizing the need for institutional reform at such a high level. And it doesn't happen until people are pressed. And, the situation with Shawn Bolz and his victims speaking out and the cover-up being exposed, it forces institutional reform. And leaders that knew these things and set people aside, meaning set victims of these crimes aside, they are, honestly, I'd say it's a disqualifying action of leadership. It's not that they did something, it's not that they were the sexually immoral ones or they were the abusers, but they perpetuated the abuse and allowed the abuse, which frankly is like, not to get overly spiritual here, but it's like Eli and his sons. Eli was too afraid to confront his sons and stop them from doing what they were doing in the temple or to the sacrifice and to the women. It's like all these guys had to do was shut it down and not put people back in authority who abuse their authority. It's criminal activity. And so,
yeah, I just want to drive that point home too, that like you said, it was clearly premeditated. His wife was out of town. He messaged you to come over. He had already arranged somewhere for his kids to be. He had your favorite beers. He fed them to you. And like you said,
and he told you, this won't happen. We know who we are. I just want you to come over to be like old times with the kids. It was a lie to bring you in.
Right. So it was all premeditated, and it was criminal what happened to you. And who knows what all Danny Silk knows as far as like, I doubt Ben was like, yeah, I got her drunk and then she said no and I drug her to the room. Like, I doubt he would admit that much. But even so, any grown adult, any man, any leader knows that someone who's your spiritual daughter, you are the leader, you are the one in charge, and you just know that like that's not an affair. And even if we didn't have the language for it, maybe 16 years ago, maybe they didn't know, you know it's not right and you know it's not equal. And they knew that you were his spiritual daughter. And so I just, the way they try to shove this book down everyone's throat and act like this is the way to restoration and that he even deserves to be restored back to ministry, which is ridiculous. It's just all based on a lie. And I guess my point is, even if Danny Silk himself was lied to, it's still a stupid idea to write a book about this situation that was clearly not an affair. And without your voice and without your consent, your story, this false narrative, is like sold in bookstores. And it's just so wrong what happened to you. So I know one thing you said to us too was you're like, I don't want to hurt anyone. I just don't want to hurt even Ben. You don't even want to hurt Ben. And it's like, no, you're not hurting anyone. Ben hurt you. Ben took something from you, and he hurt his family. He hurt his kids. He hurt the Bethel community. He hurt the leadership, and you're not hurting anyone. This isn't cancel culture. This isn't bitterness. This is the truth.
That's
and
right.
I know that everyone at Bethel and everyone who read Unpunishable and everyone who listens to him on podcasts and him on stage deserves to know the truth.
That's right.
So you're actually helping people, not hurting anyone, because they need to know. And also, I feel like anybody who's thinking about sending their kids there or going there, They need to know who Ben Armstrong is. They need to have full knowledge and all of the information before they make a decision if they're going to trust him. Okay, something else that you had told us that I thought was very strange, very weird, and I've heard this from multiple people, is that Ben seems to have this strange, I'll say, interest in women's periods. Can you tell us more about that?
So I think I was around for the beginnings of this like revelation that he had, and I remember him talking about it pretty early on about how his wife had told him, you know, long story short, when I'm on my period, I feel like I can hear God so much clearer and I feel closer to him. And he took that as like, wow, like that's really interesting. I wonder if what that is. And he had his own like theories about why when women are on their periods, they feel closer to God or maybe actually can hear from God. And so he had encouraged me and told me this, you know, we need to know when you're on your period because I'm curious and I want to see like, you know, what kind of revelations or if that is true for you. And then he goes and tells the other two female interns this. And I remember one of the interns like actually coming to him and telling him when she was on her period. I don't think I actually did because I still was like, dude, this is weird. Like, I don't need to tell you when I'm on my period. But I don't remember if I did. I don't think I did. But I remember being like, no, like, why are people doing this? And then but also, like I've said, those like spiritual things and the weird ritualistic things were so normalized and not questioned that I didn't really think twice about it or say anything, but I did think it was kind of weird. Yeah.
Well, it's just another instance of grooming for him, trying to be close to you, getting you to tell him things that are none of his business. And that was already like weird and disturbing to me. But since you told me that, I've listened to I don't know if you call it a sermon, but a message, a teaching he did on women's cycles.
I don't know why, but every time I'm on my cycle, I wind up getting these amazing downloads from God. And I think for a moment, and then God tells me it's because of the blood.
Even when he's talking about it, he's talking about women's cycles and when they're maybe more fertile and when they're maybe more feeling sexual.
Same with women, when you're ovulating, there may be more of an appetite for sex during those times. Different things like that. Your breasts get enlarged, because that's part of the cycle.
And so it's almost like he studied this and wants to know when you're on your period and wants to know when all these girls are, so that he can tell when they might be more in the mood. Basically, it's very weird. It's very weird. It's very inappropriate. And I've never heard anything like this from a stage at church and somehow wrapped up to sound extra spiritual or like it's somehow godly. It's very weird.
I mean, I don't truly know people's intentions, and for a long time I just wanted to believe that like all this like fathering and everything was like originally good. Like maybe it was all good intentions, but now that I've like gotten to the place that I'm at, I'm trying to like come to terms with that. And
we know that he had had an affair 12 years before he came to Bethel at his first church.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
You didn't know that at the time, or
like
until
right now?
After I actually connected with somebody, and this was where I began. This was a couple years ago where I really truly began understanding what happened to me. I connected with this guy who was one of their spiritual sons back at their old church before Bethel, and he told me that there was weird stuff going on. And I had heard rumors that there was something, but I never cared to know the details. But I did have moments where I was like, why didn't leadership tell me? They knew I was living with him. They knew he had this past. I never knew, and no one said anything.
Well, that's interesting because he frames it as if leadership had no idea, like he didn't disclose this to them. But in the same breath, they're like, we've known each other since we were kids and we're all best friends. And then somebody else has told us that there's no way they didn't know because that was literally a church they were connected with, like one of the Johnsons. So it's like impossible. It's impossible that nobody knew about this. But he's still
things
going
get
on
around.
podcasts pretending like, oh, nobody even knew. If we had known, we would have done things differently. It's like, no, you can't pretend that you didn't know that.
Yeah, obviously that's their story, meaning that's the church's story. We didn't know, but we highly question that.
It's been 16 years of me not being able to really truly make sense of any of this until recently. Thank God I have amazing therapists in my life and people who've helped me to understand what has happened. This came out of the blue like 2.5 weeks ago when everything was exposed with Shawn Bolz. I didn't know any of this was going on. I knew that Shawn was false and there was stuff on that. I didn't know about Mike Winger's video. I see Roseanne make her post about what she had happen with Ben, and she was one of my students at that time. I remember her so clearly. She just had these big, beautiful blue eyes. She was just such a good girl. But she had reached out to me like a year ago or so. I had made like an anonymous post on Reddit that she was in, and she saw, and she reached out to me and was like, this has happened to me too. And we talked briefly. I was not ready to speak about it. So about a year ago, I joined this Bethel processing group. I haven't said a word in there because for so long I've thought, I think everyone's against me. No one wants to hear from me. I still haven't sorted out my story in my mind and didn't make sense. It's just so confusing. I haven't even been able to talk about it, even in therapy, until like the last couple years where I'm finally getting there. So I'm in this group. I've never said anything. Roseanne makes her statement. I decide to go outside and just start writing everything down that I could remember. I spent hours. You guys have that narrative. It's a 10-page narrative. It could be 40 pages, but I'm really proud of that. And then I make this separate statement that I put in this Facebook group, and I went to post it, and I remember this could be really bad. This could be extremely triggering for me. No one's going to be on my side. No one wants to hear from me, but I'm trying to find my voice. I know that me using my voice is very important because I've been quiet for so long and so afraid. So I make this post, and it like very practically lays everything out from my point of view, and I get nothing but good support. Like, we love you. We've been waiting to hear from you. Someone said something to me like, I'm so sorry this happened to you. If we knew then what we know now, we would have walked with you through this. And I had so many people saying, us too, like, we're here for you. Like, when are you going to talk? Like, we've been waiting. We're so sorry. I've had hundreds of comments, DMs, support coming in, resources, people stepping up, old friends that I thought turned on me, checking on me, which is so wild. I feel like I got kind of catapulted back to 2009, and now I get the proper response and support, and it's been so healing. I feel like I'm finally able to start healing from this. Like, it's crazy. Like, even the last few days, I'm like seeing beauty in the sunsets again, and I'm feeling like this whole part of me I haven't been able to heal from is finally able to heal because I can finally talk about it. I've been like so stuck. So I'm just really, really grateful for you guys, for people who have encouraged me to talk and are supporting me and walking with me. I've already been through backlash. I know how horrible that is. I don't care what people think about me. I know who I am and I know my story. And so those people who are going to talk and say negative things mean nothing to me because I know I have this support. And I'm just like really, like, there are no words for how thankful I am. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you so much. We're so proud of you. And even
Thanks,
just this past week and a half of talking to you, I kind of noticed you just like coming, like just you know, we don't know you that well at all, but just I can see just you're shining, you know, as you are speaking out. And I don't mean that in a weird way, like some spiritual way. I just mean, it's just like, I can see you coming alive in your heart about like being able to talk about it and open up. And so I know that especially for those that have known you for years are probably noticing the same thing. And we're so proud of you, and you've done the right thing in this. And so Christina, do you have any final?
Just thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
story.
you, guys.
I really think it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm just glad you had a chance to get your story out there. It's important.
I hope that people feel that they can, if they're hiding or in any kind of scenario that I've been in, that they feel free to be able to talk about it. And I personally want to say I stand with those people, and I want to hear your stories because hearing other people talk about it is what brought me out. So that's important.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Guys, thanks for plugging in. That was a powerful interview by Sarah. She did an incredible job. Let us know your thoughts below in this one. Give a comment, like the video, get it moving on the algorithm. This story needs to get out there, and share this video with those that you think it would be helpful for. Guys, as always, we are not full-time YouTubers, but you can go in the link description below to see different things that we do to support this podcast. You can go in there and see the services we provide or ways to support the podcast. We appreciate you guys plugging in and supporting victims of these situations and just helping them get their stories out, because I believe this has been healing for Sarah in the process of all the other things she's doing, just actually having a voice. And we also just want to say to Sarah, thanks for trusting us to carry your story. It's an honor. All right, guys, if you have things that you want to reach out to us about, tips, stories, we have an email address. It's wakeupandwinp@gmail.com, wakeupandwinp for podcast @gmail.com. We're not really big in our DMs, getting private DMs. We're just not checking all the socials and getting DMs. So if you've sent us a DM, don't feel bad if we're not seeing it or responding. Just send us an email. That'll be the best way to reach out to us both at the same time. All right, guys. Thanks for plugging in. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.